The envelope was still in my coat pocket when I got to the front door. I remember thinking that was the strangest part, not the silence of the house, not the fact that my brother-in-law's truck was parked in the driveway when it had no business being there, but that I was still carrying a thank you card I'd never gotten around to mailing. 3 weeks. I'd been meaning to send it for 3 weeks. My father-in-law had helped us move furniture into the guest room, and I'd written the card the same afternoon, sealed it, and then just forgotten. Life kept moving. And then it didn't. My husband, Daniel, died on a Thursday. I found out about the envelope on a Saturday. I want to explain something before I go any further, because I've thought a lot about how to tell this story without sounding like I'm asking for sympathy. I'm not. What I went through is not unique. Women have been erased from their own lives for centuries quietly, politely, with a smile and a firm hand at their back guiding them toward the door. What happened to me was a variation of something old. The only difference is that I knew, somewhere deep and steady inside me, that I was not going to let it work. Daniel and I had been married for 4 years when he was diagnosed. Glioblastoma. The kind of word that doesn't leave room for softening. The doctors told us in November, and by the following October, I was sitting in the second row of a church in Savannah, Georgia, listening to his older brother Marcus give a eulogy that mentioned me exactly once, and of course, Daniel's wife, the way you mention a side dish at a dinner that's really about the main course. I was 31 years old. I had quit my job as a paralegal to become his full-time caregiver for the last 8 months of his life. I had learned to administer IV medication, manage his pain schedule, navigate insurance appeals, and sit with him through nights that had no good ending. I had loved him through the version of himself that the tumor was slowly replacing, and I had held his hand when that version finally went quiet. I was also, according to his mother Carol, a temporary inconvenience that had reached its expiration date. I didn't know that yet when I walked into the church. I found out 2 days later. The morning after the funeral, I woke up in the house. Daniel and I had bought together a 1940s craftsman bungalow on the east side of Savannah, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with original tile that we'd argued over whether to keep. We kept it. I paid the mortgage alone for the last 14 months because Daniel's disability payments barely covered his medication. My name was on the deed. My name was on the mortgage. This was not in dispute. This was simply a fact, the way the address was a fact, the way the street number painted on the mailbox was a fact. I woke up, I made coffee. I sat on the back porch for a long time and watched the yard and tried to figure out how to be a person whose husband was gone. Then I drove to the pharmacy to pick up a refill I'd forgotten to cancel, and when I came back, the key didn't work. I stood there for a moment, thinking I'd made some mistake. Inserted it wrong. Turned it the wrong direction. I tried again. I tried the deadbolt separately. I tried the side door off the carport. I walked around to the back and tried the door off the laundry room, the one with the sticky handle we'd always meant to fix. All locked. All wrong. Marcus's truck was still in the driveway. I could hear voices inside. I knocked. Carol opened the door. She was wearing an apron, my apron. The one with the small blue stripes that I'd bought at a farmer's market in Asheville on a trip Daniel and I took for our 2nd anniversary. She was wearing it like she'd been wearing it for years, like it had always belonged to her kitchen, which was now apparently her kitchen. "We need to talk," she said. She didn't step aside to let me in. I asked her, very calmly, to explain why my key didn't work. She said she'd had the locks changed that morning. She said it was better for everyone if I understood that this house had been in their family, her word, their family, long before I came along. She said Daniel would have wanted her to take care of it. She said I was young, that I would be fine, that I had my whole life ahead of me. I asked her to give me the new key. She said she didn't think that was appropriate. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment, because I think people expect the clean version, the spine straightening, the cold fury, the instant pivot into action hero. That is not what happened. What happened is that my legs went strange and I had to put one hand on the door frame, and I thought very clearly and specifically, Daniel, what do I do? The way you think something to a person who can no longer answer. He didn't answer. But I knew what I had to do. I said, very quietly. Carol, I own this house. My name is on the deed and the mortgage. What you've done is illegal. She told me I was confused. She told me grief does strange things to people's thinking. She told me that Daniel had talked to Marcus about what he wanted, and that this was a family matter, and that I was welcome to take my personal things if I made an appointment. An appointment to enter my own home. I stepped back from the door. I walked to my car. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time. Then I did two things that I believe saved me from months of additional suffering. First, I called the Savannah Police Department's non-emergency line and reported that I had been locked out of my own home by someone who had changed the locks without authorization. The dispatcher asked if I had proof of ownership. I told her my name was on the deed and the mortgage, that I had copies in my car, and that there was a woman inside wearing my apron. The dispatcher found that last detail, I think, as personally offensive as I did. Second, I called my old boss. I had worked for 6 years as a paralegal at a small firm in Savannah before leaving to care for Daniel. My boss, Patricia, had told me when I left that if I ever needed anything, she meant that literally. I had not wanted to take her up on it. I was calling her now. She answered on the second ring. By the time the two officers arrived at the house, I was standing in the driveway with my mortgage statement, a copy of the deed with both my name and Daniel's printed clearly across the top, and Patricia, on speakerphone, walking the officers through exactly what Carol had and had not the legal right to do, which was, to summarize, nothing. Carol had no legal right to change the locks. She had no legal right to occupy the property. She had no legal claim to the house under Georgia intestate law, which, in the absence of a will and in the absence of children, directed the entirety of the estate to the surviving spouse. She was, as Patricia put it, with the calm specificity of someone who has spent 30 years in family law, a trespasser. Carol came to the door when the officers knocked. I watched her face move through several expressions very quickly, authority, then irritation, then something that briefly looked like genuine shock, as if the law was a guest she hadn't expected to show up. The officers asked her to return the keys. She said she needed to call Marcus. One of the officers said she was welcome to call whoever she'd like, but that she needed to return the keys and vacate the property or they would need to move forward with trespassing charges. She gave me the keys. She didn't look at me when she did it. She held them out at a slight angle, the way you might offer something to a person you hoped would simply disappear, and I took them, and I said thank you the way you say it when you mean something else entirely. Marcus arrived 20 minutes later, after Carol and his wife had carried out 2 bags they'd apparently already packed, which told me they'd expected to be there longer than one morning. He stood in the driveway and looked at me with an expression I can only describe as the face of someone recalculating a situation they thought they'd already solved. He said they were just trying to protect the family's interests. I asked him which family he meant. He didn't answer that. I want to tell you about the next part carefully, because it's the part that people sometimes find hard to believe, and I understand that. I found it hard to believe too, in the weeks that followed, sitting at the kitchen table with Patricia and a paralegal named Josh, who had the particular energy of someone who genuinely enjoys untangling things other people have tied into knots. 3 days after the lock incident, Patricia had a full accounting of Daniel's estate. There was a checking account, a small savings account, a retirement account from a job he'd left 4 years before we met, and the house. No will something we had talked about making and never gotten around to, which is a thing I have to live with, but under Georgia law, the absence of a will did not create a gap that Carol or Marcus could fill. It created a clear directive. Everything to the surviving spouse. Everything to me. Marcus, it turned out, had made certain assumptions. He had already spoken to a real estate agent. Patricia found this out through a contact and had received a preliminary valuation of the property. He had also, in the weeks before Daniel died, had several conversations with Daniel that he characterized to the officers when asked, as Daniel expressing his wishes. The problem with that characterization is that wishes expressed in conversation to a brother are not a legal instrument. They are a memory. A comfortable one, perhaps, for Marcus. But not a deed. Not a will. Not anything that a court would recognize as a transfer of property. Patricia sent a letter to Marcus's address. It outlined, in the specific language that makes such letters what they are, the legal reality of the situation. It noted that any further attempts to access the property would be met with a formal trespassing complaint. It noted that the estate would proceed through proper probate channels. It noted, with a brevity I found enormously satisfying, that the matter was considered closed. I did not hear from Carol for 11 days. When she called, her voice had a different quality than it had at the door, smaller, somehow, less certain of its own authority. She said she hoped I understood that they had only been trying to do what was right. She said grief makes people act in ways they wouldn't otherwise. She said she hoped we could find a way to stay connected, for Daniel's sake. I thought about what to say for a long moment. I told her I was glad she'd called. I told her I did understand that grief is disorienting and that I had a great deal of compassion for the fact that she had lost her son. I meant that. I still mean it. I told her I also needed her to understand that what she had done, entering my home, changing my locks, intending to claim property that belonged to me, was not a grief response, it was a choice. And that the two of us moving forward in any capacity would require her to understand that distinction clearly. She was quiet for a moment, then she said she understood. I don't know if she does. I think, sometimes, that certain people are built in a way that makes understanding this particular kind of thing very difficult. They have organized the world into family and not family, and they have decided that legal documents are a technicality when weighed against that organization. I don't think Carol is a bad person. I think she loved her son. I think she was terrified of losing him, and when she lost him anyway, she reached for the next thing she could hold on to, and what she reached for happened to be mine. But I had stopped letting people take what was mine a long time ago. The probate process took 4 months. It was not dramatic. It was paperwork and waiting, and one brief, procedural hearing where Marcus appeared with an attorney and made a claim that his attorney, to his visible discomfort, clearly did not believe had a strong foundation. The judge agreed. The estate was settled in my name. The house remained mine. I changed all the locks the same afternoon the ruling came through. Not because I was afraid, exactly. Because it felt like the right punctuation. Patricia took me to dinner to celebrate. We went to a place on the river that Daniel and I had gone to on our first anniversary, and I ordered the thing he always ordered because I wanted to be somewhere near him for an hour, in whatever way was still possible. I cried a little in the car afterward, in the parking garage, before I drove home. The kind of crying that isn't about sadness exactly, but about the accumulated weight of a year of holding yourself together through something that kept finding new ways to be hard. I sat in my car for a while and I thought about all of it, the apron, the keys, the look on Carol's face when she realized the law was not going to bend to accommodate her certainty. And I thought about something Patricia had said to me early on, in those first phone calls when I was still processing what had happened. She'd said, "The people who do this are counting on you not knowing what you're entitled to. They are counting on grief making you small. Don't let them make you small." I had not let them make me small. I drove home. I unlocked the door with my key. I walked through the house in the dark, touching things the way you do when you're reminding yourself what's real: the kitchen tile we'd argued over and kept, the bookshelf we'd built together the first month we moved in, the back door with the sticky handle that I finally, 3 months after the funeral, had fixed myself. I made tea. I sat in the kitchen. Outside, the yard was doing what yards do in late October in Georgia: leaves going, air sharpening, the particular quality of light that means the year is getting ready to fold. I had a lot of grief still in front of me. I knew that. The house being mine didn't change the fact of what was absent from it. It didn't fill the particular silence of the other side of the bed, or make the mornings easier, or give me back the person I had spent 4 years building a life with. But it was mine. Everything in it was mine. The life I was going to build next, still unknown, still mostly dark, but real, was mine. No one was going to change the locks on that. If you've ever been in a situation where someone used your grief against you, where they counted on your loss to make you forget what you are owed, I want you to hear this. You are allowed to grieve and fight at the same time. You do not have to choose between falling apart and standing up. You can do both. You can cry in the parking garage and still be the person who calls the police. You can miss someone every single day and still refuse to let the people who failed them come back and fail you too. Know your rights. Keep your documents somewhere safe. And if someone tries to walk into your life and rearrange it while you're still learning how to breathe without someone in it, let them know, clearly and legally, exactly which door leads out.